Hi, my name is Gibson, and I'm the creator of the Personal Development School. This is your daily breakthrough video, and in this video, I want to talk to you a little bit about the anxious preoccupied fears and wounds when in a relationship with a dismissive avoidant. And by understanding these core fears that are likely to come up, it will help you learn what I need to communicate, how I need to navigate these things, just with some insight into this relationship and how it affects you, which can then in turn help you apply different tools that will help you thrive in the relationship long term. Now, if you want to do a deeper dive into this, and I've been saying this in these other videos, we have very extensive online webinar style courses with the PowerPoints that literally break down all the tools you need for navigating all the major attachment style relationships. So we have a full course about anxious, preoccupied, and dismissive avoidant and fearful avoidant, two fearful avoidants in a relationship, and each of the major dynamics. And so the other ones included. So what it's going to help you to do is learn how to communicate to each other, learn how to move the needle on your specific pain points that are likely to show up in that relationship with each other, so that you can work through things, thrive, release all the resentment that may be there, all the misunderstandings, and actually feel committed and connected and have a relationship that can last. So with that being said, if you want to check that out, by the way, you can check it out by clicking the link in the description box below, and you can check it out for 7 days for free. The course is specifically for now or in the webinar library. And when you just search in the titles in the webinar library, you'll see that one come up. So if you say like anxious, preoccupied, and dismissive avoidant, you'll see that there. So with that being said, very first thing that you need to know is that the anxious preoccupied, of course, fears being abandoned by the dismissive avoidant. And that loss, that disconnecting, all that kind of stuff that goes hand in hand with it, also something that can be quite scary or difficult. Also, the anxious preoccupied struggles to be alone while with the dismissive avoidant in a relationship. And the reason for this is that the intermittent reinforcement that comes with a DA, where sometimes they're available, sometimes they're not, can cause the AP and their wounds to sort of not like spiral, but a little bit, like really, they can become so focused on the relationship with this person that they're in a relationship with, that they kind of like give up a little bit on other areas of their life to the same degree. Like they're not showing up the same way. So they may not be focusing on their career so much anymore, not be focusing on how they're spending their money or budgeting. Maybe they're spending all the money on trying to impress the DA in some way, or things like that, going on vacations or spending time together. Sometimes we'll see the anxious preoccupied as well get into situations where they're not spending as much time with family or friends, because APs are generally very codependent. And so they can be so focused on the DA that they also fear spending time alone, because in that alone time, they tend to kind of ruminate and stress and worry and wonder what the DA is doing. So these can be huge pain points in this relationship. Then, of course, the anxious preoccupied can fear being rejected or not good enough, and feeling unseen, unheard, or unimportant, especially when the dismissive avoidant deactivates in the relationship. And they often feel like they don't matter or are taken for granted. But more than anything else, they fear that disapproval. An abandonment wound is the biggest. And just second to that is feeling that I am unsafe. And one thing that I really want to highlight is the dismissive avoidant, though DAs are generally quite conflict avoidant. I don't mean unsafe, like they're going to do something super conflicting and outrageous. I mean the dismissive avoidant, because there's no certainty if the person's going to stay or go, they often have that uncertainty trigger this I am unsafe core wound. And where this has roots is actually in our early childhood, when we are dependent on our caregivers in order to survive. And literally we need to be intertwined with them because survival equals approval. And often what happens is when an AP is in a relationship with their caregivers in childhood, if there's a lot of inconsistency, they feel like if I get abandoned, I can't survive. So it's abandonment and unsafety kind of go hand in hand. And so the same thing happens in this individual's adult romantic relationships, where the AP will feel oh my gosh, if I get abandoned, I'm going to be unsafe all on my own. And those things can really get roped up together, and it can be really tumultuous or challenging. So AP also, in their own way, and this is something else to note in this relationship, fears being vulnerable. And I know it doesn't sound like it because they express their emotions, and that's one facet of vulnerability. But another big facet of vulnerability is the ability to be authentic, to drop one's mask, to share oneself, to express what your needs are, to express boundaries, and to get out of people pleasing. When we're people pleasing, we're wearing a mask. And so APs have their own small version of emotional unavailability, because they tend to people please, they tend to seek that approval, and they're not necessarily always being themselves. So it's their own version of emotional unavailability, and it can really be a fear that the AP has of showing up and truly expressing themselves. So these are all really important dynamics to be aware of. Now, what do you do? Well, number one, you want to do reprogramming work around these fears. And number two, you want to work on communicating these fears in your relationship in a healthy way. What I highly recommend doing, and I'm just going to say this at a high level, but there are, again, you can check out that course and we're going to go in depth there with all of like the needs and how to express the needs and how to best communicate to a DA. But what I want to highlight is that it's really valuable to communicate your need first rather than the fear. Like if you're starting and let's say you need some transparency, or let's say you need some reassurance that everything's good in the relationship, or let's say you need a little more quality time together, rather than saying like I am totally afraid and I feel like you're abandoning me and you're going to abandon me and this is what I need. Sometimes it's easier because sometimes the DA doesn't know how. They don't have a lot of emotional modeling growing up. And sometimes it's not, they don't know what to do with the feeling part, right? They're so busy repressing their own feelings. It's going to be difficult for them to have full space and like know how to, elegantly execute on working with someone else's feelings. And so they can feel a little triggered by that. It's also like sometimes their shadow side, right? Because they're pushing that down. And when someone else expresses what we're trying to keep away from our own self, it can feel a little bit triggering. So what I ultimately recommend is just start by communicating a need first. Just say, hey, reassurance is important to me in a relationship, or words of affirmation are important to me in a relationship. And like, can we get into the habit of practicing that once a week? Or can we get into the habit of like being intentional about that in the relationship? And just creating like a need that's really specific, really clear, that helps mitigate those fears, and then bringing that need into the relationship while working on your fears and doing that inner reprogramming work so you can become secure and be your best self. Those two things together are very powerful. So it's a really great place to start. Again, there's specific ways that are good to communicate with the DA in specific forms, using specific steps, tools, hacks, little strategies. And you can check those all out in our Anxious, Preoccupied, and Dismissive Avoidant Relationship course. And again, you can check it out for free for 7 days by clicking the link in the description box below. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Thank you. Bye.